Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the Wright Flyer. I'm Randy Wright, and I'll be your captain on this solo flight special edition of our state-of-the-art radio program. Folks, we'll take the final boarding call, so if you please, claim your seats, fasten your seatbelts, kick back, relax, and enjoy the show while I go ahead and delve into the pre-flight checklist, because there really is a lot of news and information to get to before I may fully indulge you with your in-flight entertainment. Well, folks, there has been a lot of controversy swirling around the campaign of New York billionaire, businessman, real estate tycoon, and Bulgarian Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus. As we witnessed last night unfurling before the cameras of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media, there was violence that poured into the streets of the windy city of Chicago and also in the city of St. Louis, Missouri. Of course, the United States of America has been exposed to increased racial animosity and tensions ever since the summer of 2015. As we recall, the communist-backed organization known as Black Lives Matters has been stoking the flames of racial animus in this great republic of ours. I would even go so far as to say that race relations in this great republic have deteriorated to a 40-year low. And folks, that is back to the time before the Civil Rights Acts went into place. It's important to recall that the way that the natural law tenets of our shared United States Constitution applies is meant to be applicable to all citizens, irrespective of race or status or socioeconomic position. That is something that explains the natural law tenets that applies and forms the foundation of our system of polity here in the United States. It's meant to apply equally to everyone. That is the entire notion of equal protection under the law. And what we see unfurling before our very eyes in this very heated and contentious 2016 presidential election cycle is that violence is now a cornerstone to at least the campaign of one of the candidates vying for the gutless opposition party or GOP nomination. And of course, folks, there's something entirely unacceptable about that. In fact, the violence reached a fever pitch last night, which prompted the various opponents of Donald Trump, all who are still vying for the coveted nomination of the Republican Party, to come out at various points in the immediate aftermath of the onslaught to condemn not only the violence, but also to lay blame squarely at the feet of the New York Bulgarian and businessman. This led some conservatives to wonder and ponder openly whether these remarks, particularly on the part of Texas Senator Ted Cruz, was a direct assault and affront against our fundamental and unalienable free speech rights as guaranteed by the clear and concise language contained within the First Amendment to the Bill of Rights, or the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. While on the surface it may appear so, and it's very important that we remain vigilant and stalwart in the defense of our fundamental and unalienable rights, because certainly with respect to the Fabian socialists, such as Vermont Senator Nerdface Boynme Sanders and former Secretary of State and First Lady Hillary Rotten Clinton, they have no bones about striking out against the free speech rights of the ultimate wielders of sovereignty of this country, we the people. However, it's important to remember a notion that my first officer, Jeremy Grapenton, and I have reiterated oft-times on past episodes of the Wright Flyer, and that is this express notion that we as popular sovereigns are endowed by our Creator with certain fundamental and inalienable rights, which means that no rightful, legitimate, earthly authority could take away or abridge or belittle those rights without using the process of due process under the law. Now, what exactly does that mean? Well, it means that we would have to have a trial in front of a jury of our peers and be adjudicated as to having violated the fundamental and inalienable rights of a fellow citizen. So it goes to that sort of cardinal golden rule with respect to how we exercise our fundamental and unalienable rights. And that is this: our rights end where another sovereign individual rights begins. And that is a quintessential part to understanding the way that our constitutional system of government works. And it goes even further than that. When you stop and think about it, the courts have even applied a doctrine in the field of constitutional law which restates exactly what Jeremy and I say with respect to this notion that our rights end where another sovereign entity's rights begin. And when I say sovereign entity, I mean person. People are the only things that can have rights. Now, of course, there is this legal fiction of corporations being considered people, and I've covered that on other episodes, and it's not on point for the message that we need to discuss on today's episode. So I'm going to move away from that and focus primarily on individuals, the popular sovereigns, we the people. And that doctrine from the courts of which I speak is known as the fighting words doctrine. Free speech is absolute, but we as popular sovereigns must be cognizant of the fact that with our fundamental and unalienable rights, there always couches a duty, obligation, and responsibility with respect to the exercise of that right. And that duty and responsibility here is that we do not use speech in such a way as to encroach upon the fundamental and inalienable rights of our fellow citizens. In other words, if I use inflammatory words in an intentional and knowing fashion to cause harm or to incite violence against another person, which would thereby encroach upon their freedoms and liberties, then I can be adjudicated as to having violated their rights. And in fact, the fighting words doctrine has been where the courts have held that when you use your speech in such a reckless fashion and intentionally are promoting and utilizing that speech to incite violence against your fellow citizens, then the protections offered by the First Amendment do not apply. It's similar to the way that the First Amendment has been ruled not to apply to pornography. And they apply a test. The test that they apply, they ask whether it has any value to society, whether it has any redeeming qualities and would be acceptable in decent society. Well, with respect to some of the claims and statements that Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus has made throughout this 2016 presidential election cycle, it is questionable as to whether his claims would have any redeeming societal or artistic or cultural application or value. I mean, we know that back in Iowa, when there were protesters that were interrupting his campaign event, he told the people there that it would be a good idea if we could just go back to the old days where people like that would be taken out on a stretcher. In fact, I've even got the audio where Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus makes that statement. And I'm going to cue it up right now.
They used to do to guys like that when they were in a place like this, they'd be carried out on a stretcher, folks.
All right. You see, he said that when somebody would come and interrupt a campaign rally or event like that, in the old days, they'd be carried out on a stretcher. Well, you know, that's the sort of insightful and inflammatory language which the courts have deemed that the First Amendment protections do not apply to. We have to be cognizant of that fact. And it is an alarming pattern that we have noticed with respect to Donaldus Julius Caesar's campaign that should raise red flags for decent, hardworking, red-blooded Americans from coast to coast. Of all the candidates who are vying for the highest office in the land, that of President of the United States, on either side of the political aisle, there is only one that has been continuously engrossed with absolute violence, and that is the campaign of Donald Trump. As I'm sure you are all aware, the other evening there was a Trump supporter, a 79-year-old Trump supporter, mind you, who went out of his way to approach the aisles of the venue because it was in this auditorium-like setting, and security was escorting a protester out. And without provocation, this man reached his arm back and threw a haymaker right into the face of this black protester. Now, you know from our past episodes of the Wright Flyer that I am no ardent supporter of Black Lives Matters. In fact, I consider them a nefarious Fabian socialist organization that is peddling Marxism and is trying to tear this country apart with the doctrines of cultural Marxism. We saw them try to apply gross generalizations to the white American community in the immediate aftermath of that senseless and tragic shooting at the Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church in South Carolina back in June of 2015, when that sociopath Dylan Storm Roof opened up and killed, I believe it was 8 or 9 innocent parishioners while they were simply attempting to practice their faith. Well, the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media seized upon that and attempted to apply the blame to an inanimate object, that being the Southern Cross battle flag, which was carried by Confederate soldiers during the war between the states. And they tried to make that a fulcrum for all of the protests and all of the claims and pressure that were applied to the various state and local governments throughout the South to tear down the flags and the monuments to those who fought and died for a cause they believed in, irrespective of whether we find the issues that they fought for as derogatory. That would be a completely different discussion and topic for another program. But we see that this cultural Marxism has been utilized in such a way as to pit American against American. And it is done for the sole purpose of trying to turn us against each other, to basically destroy any notion that there is something greater to America, the greater good. You know, there was a time when politicians on either side of the aisle would have pushed for the greater good of the United States. Well, that has all but vanished. In fact, it has vanished in the arena of American politics and modernity. We see that we are more divided now than we have been at any other point in living memory. In fact, the last time that we have been as divided as a nation and as a people as we are today was in 1860. That's in the vicinity right before the start of hostilities of the American Civil War. And that's something that we need to keep in mind when we analyze everything that is unfurling before us right now. This type of animosity is being stirred up by the radical frothing of the mouth Fabian socialists who have, without a doubt, been pushing this narrative in the hopes of applying a tactic and strategy, both a tactic and strategy. At the tactical level, what they're trying to do is incite the sort of violence we saw pour out onto the streets of Chicago last evening and in St. Louis, Missouri. And I'm not going to disagree with anybody who says that the Black Lives Matter protesters were wrong. They were. And what Ted Cruz was saying is that they were wrong, but that the inflammatory language used by Donald Trump encouraged this outpouring of violence. And he even said to a reporter, once again proving that he is consistently inconsistent, that he enjoys the violence because it garners increased votes for him. It secures a certain swath of the population to vote for him. And I think, folks, that is why when we were going into the Super Saturday primary and caucus decisions and that contest, he stumbled on disavowing the unofficial endorsement of former Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan, David Duke, because he sees that reaching out to this very rabid minority sect of the American population could boost him. It's why he has been able to secure the old Dixiecrat vote in the open primaries, where Democrats are allowed to cross over and vote in the GOP primaries. And that is in conjunction with the sort of reverse operation of what, right-wing talk show host Rush Limbaugh pushed for back in the 2008 election cycle. I believe he called it Operation Chaos, where he thought that we should go out and vote for the weakest candidate that seemed to be the most unelectable. And at that time, it was a little-known senator from Illinois, Barack Hussein Obama. Unfortunately, that backfired because at that same time, there was a coup going on within the rank and file of the Democrat Party, where the Fabian Socialists were clinching the reins of power and control of that political party. And then on a strategic level, Trump is using this as a way of using his stance against the cancerous doctrine of political correctness as blanket cover, almost as a form of blanket amnesty, so that he could just call it off as a joke. Oh, well, it was off-color humor. And you know, folks, that Jeremy and I here on Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, have unequivocally declared war on that poisonous and cancerous doctrine of political correctness. We do not believe that it has a place in an open and honest society or a representative republic that is constitutionally endowed like that of the United States of America. But we also believe in that cardinal golden rule with respect to our fundamental and inalienable rights that have been handed to us and endowed to us by our Creator, and that is our rights end where another's begins. And so the protesters had a right to protest. They also had to suffer the consequences of their action that was being hauled out of the arena. But on the flip side of that, Donaldus Julius Caesar is allowed to say these inflammatory things in an extent, but he must face the consequences. And as I mentioned, with the fighting words doctrine that the courts have created, and which goes along the lines of this cardinal rule of which I just mentioned, he must face the consequences for inciting the violence. And I think that it's going to be something that is detrimental and deleterious to his campaign, but maybe not. This entire 2016 presidential election cycle has been anything but orthodox. It's been an unorthodox campaign, and conventional wisdom has been flung out the window. And why? It's because, as Jeremy and I mentioned on yesterday evening's program, there is this sense of blind rage burning like a gas fire in the rank and file of the gutless opposition party, or GOP. And that centers around a notion of despair and hopelessness, because the American people have seen the so-called detente wing of the gutless opposition party make these verbose and grandiose promises time and again, every time that we go through an election cycle. Most recently, the midterm elections of November of 2014, where they say that they're going to make a die-in-the-wool stance, make an absolute stance against the Fabian socialist policies espoused by this Barack Hussein Obama regime, that they would put an end to the so-called Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, what is colloquially known as Obamacare, and that they wouldn't allow his executive amnesty to go forward. Now, they haven't kept up with any of that. In fact, the new Speaker of the House, Benedict Arnold Paul Ryan, who in years past had claimed that he would be stalwart in his push for a balanced budget, gave an omnibus budget to Barack Hussein Obama, basically and essentially giving him everything that he wanted, including funding for his executive amnesty. It's as though they are purposefully forgetting that one of their Article 1, Section 8 powers is the power of the purse. They could put a swift and immediate end to the sort of unconstitutional chicanery that we're seeing espoused by the Barack Hussein Obama regime. And the problem with that is when they refuse to utilize the constitutional powers that are at their disposal, they are essentially ceding their authority to the executive branch of government. That puts in peril the separation of powers that is a quintessential part of the way that the Constitution designed our federal government. And that goes into the philosophical notions and jurisprudential notions that are at the heart of this representative republic of ours. And I can understand that that would lead to the American people feeling angry. But this is transformed from an expression of righteous indignation and justified anger to blind fury, where it would appear that many of the Trump followers, like that 79-year-old who unprovoked attacked that protester as he was leaving or being escorted out of the venue, that's blind fury. That's blind fury that's destructive. It wants to just burn down our entire constitutional system and replace it with what? Well, the Chicago Tribune had a picture of a Trump supporter giving a Nazi salute to a camera for one of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media. Folks, there is no way that that is acceptable behavior in this country. My grandfathers fought in World War II. They were staunchly opposed to the forces of fascism. And remember, folks, the forces of fascism, the Axis powers, were united in their hatred of the United States. They declared war on us before we declared war on them. Our stance was reactionary and defensive. And folks, make no mistake about it, that there will be a reflective, reactionary anger to the outpouring of blind rage that we have seen on the part of the followers of Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus. It goes to one of Newton's laws. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. We have to keep that in mind, and therefore it is why it is so important for us as popular sovereigns to take a step back and recall that with every fundamental and unalienable right that has been endowed to us, there is an equal and important duty, obligation, and responsibility to exercise our rights in a legitimate fashion that does not encroach upon the fundamental and inalienable rights of our fellow citizens. That is the way that our system was designed to work. That was the foundational image that our founding fathers had for this country, dating back to its inception over 230 years ago. But this has all been lost in the fray. It's been lost in the tirades and the Trumper tantrums, for lack of a better term, that have played out in this country since he officially threw his hat in the ring. It has been an increase in tension. We've seen a glaring and drastic erosion of civil discourse in this country, and I'm not going to lay that completely at the feet of Donaldus. Certainly, it was put forward by Barack Hussein Obama, who, as I'm sure you all recall, stated at one point that he had both an enemies list and he demanded that his followers get up into the face of those who disagree with him. That shows the lack of tolerance on the left. But we cannot allow ourselves to be dragged down to the level of vulgarity and to become vulgarians like those on the left. But that is what Donald Trump is. Now, don't get me wrong. I understand fighting fire with fire, and I am not opposed to fighting fire with fire in a defensive fashion. But to become the instigator of this violence shows that all of a sudden the Fabian socialists, who are beloved by the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media, will be able to harp all the time during the general election, irrespective of who actually clinches the gutless opposition party nomination, fits the stereotypes that they have painted of the right in this country. They're going to say, look, the way that Corey Lewandowski treated Michelle Fields, who was a reporter for Breitbart News, which should in all actuality be referred to as Trump Bart News, a very friendly organization to him. He allowed Corey Lewandowski to pull her down with physical force, with enough force to have bruises. And then Lewandowski came out and said that she was delusional on Twitter, that he had never even met her, and that Donald Trump demanded that other graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media go out and check her background and check her record. And they tried to bring up some claim that she had brought against one conservative figure whose name escapes me at this moment, that turned out to be false. I think it was against Alan West. Either way, it doesn't matter. There is photographic evidence of the bruising. And then the Trumpeteers came out and said, well, this was at a public venue, a press conference, and there were no pictures of it. Well, then pictures surfaced. There was no video of it. Well, video surfaced. Well, there's no recording of it. No, sound recording also surfaced. And yet they keep moving the goalposts because they want to claim plausible deniability. And the other thing that they demanded is, well, if it was really that bad, why is there no police report? Well, she was in the process of filing a police report for battery and assault. And therefore, I am going to repeat my calls here on the Wright Flyer, the call that Jeremy and I made on last evening's program for Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus to fire Corey Lewandowski. You know, Ted Cruz did the upstanding thing and fired his public relations director or communications director after there had been those slip-ups, and that is a lot less of a problem than facing criminal charges of assault and battery. And when looking into the history of Corey Lewandowski, we find out that he was arrested for carrying a loaded firearm into a important campaign office because he was working on a campaign at that time. You see, folks, again, where there's smoke, there is fire. There is this undeniable pattern that we see resurface time and again with respect to Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus's campaign and his staff and personnel. And it is unacceptable for that, because we are giving ammunition to the Fabian socialists and the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media to lambast us during the general election. And that will pave a path to unstoppable victory to Hillary Rotten Clinton, because it, by any stretch of the imagination right now, looking at the way that the superdelegates are stacked up and the way that the delegate count is currently stacked up, she stands to win the nomination for the Democratic Party. And I know that Trump likes to go out in front of the cameras for the salivating mainstream media and say that he is expanding the big tent party of the gutless opposition party. But we've seen on social media, and we've heard from even some of those Democrats that we are unfortunate enough to know, that a lot of them are crossing over to do the reverse of Rush Limbaugh's Operation Chaos. Oh, he's going to be easy to defeat. Well, if we keep seeing outlandish outbursts, these unacceptable outbursts and attacks on the part of Trumpus, his campaign, and some of his followers, the media's narrative is made for them. They don't even have to work hard. He is doing that in such a way that it will irreparably harm the image of conservatives and the cause of conservatism and constitutionalism for younger generations for years to come. Because we know that the historical revisionists have already entrenched themselves in our institutions of education from coast to coast and border to border. We also know that the information media outlets are controlled by the Fabian socialists who have composed and written the curriculum for Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media. And that means that we are making their jobs easy for them when we are already going into something that puts us at a distinct disadvantage. We are handing this sort of disruptive, abrasive fulfillment of their caricatures of the right on a silver platter. Now, folks, that means that an uphill battle has now become a climb up Mount Everest. It makes our chances of victory that much more difficult in a time when Hillary Rotten Clinton should be one of the weakest candidates that the Democrats have put up in living memory. She doesn't resonate with young voters. She doesn't resonate with the majority of the population. But here's the deal. Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus and his rather distasteful habit of being consistently inconsistent is driving a wedge between the base of the gutless opposition party, ensuring that about 70% of the constitutional conservatives, the traditional base of the gutless opposition party, will stay home during the general election, thereby paving the path to victory for Hillary Rotten Clinton. Now, folks, you can't make this stuff up. It is there, plain as day, for everyone to see. And this is what Donaldus Julius Caesar has been unleashing upon our political party. But not just our political party, but our entire system of government. The last thing that the United States of America needs to do ever is embrace something that even comes remotely near fascism. Fascism is destructive. Think back to what the fascist dictators of Benito Mussolini, of Hideki Tojo in Japan, and Adolf Hitler in Germany did for the world. They pitted the world into a dark, destructive, long, and drawn-out bloody conflict. And we see that, yes, some of the Black Lives Matters protesters were out there in Chicago carrying the blood, crimson, and gold hammer and sickle banner of the communists. And then we also see that some of the various supporters of Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus were out there proudly flashing Nazi salutes to the cameras of the salivating mainstream media. Now, folks, I want you to stop and recall for a minute here that the last time these two forces clashed in such an open fashion, it plunged the world into war. Now, the Trumpids might come out and claim that this is just part of their righteous anger. No. The anger that will be unleashed, should they bring about defeat for a true constitutionalist, when we have had a true constitutionalist stand up and campaign for the highest office in the land, then you're going to see the type of righteous indignation that was felt by the patriots at the start of our War of Independence. And remember, folks, that was a long, drawn-out, and bloody affair. That sort of anger will be unleashed if we allow a vulgarian, a closeted fascist, to secure the reins of power in this country. Because it is going to make the people feel as though the Constitution is being once again assaulted, and that a true enabler of the so-called establishment of both aisles of the political parties will have clinched the nomination, when he hadn't even been capable of securing a complete majority of the vote. And that's part of the problem. We have the establishment who continues to leave Narco Rube EIEIO and John the Mushroom, my father was a mailman, Kasich, in the race. And that is splitting the anti-Trump coalition, which is made up of your bread and butter conservatives, for the most part, divided. We need to coalesce together, to unite behind a candidate. We need to take a firm stance in defense of our fundamental and unalienable rights, because no one else will do that. And that's the problem with the Trump voters. They're looking at Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus, and they're seeing him as a messianic figure who might be able to save this country on his own. Certainly his answers would appear to give that perception. But, you know, folks, when you compare that side to side with the various fascist dictators, and indeed even the communist dictators of the 20th century, that's the same type of language they utilized and preached and used to manipulate people that were whipped up into this blind rage. Blind rage is destructive, because it makes you malleable like putty in the hands of these various dictators who are operating under ulterior motives. They are not out there for you. They are out there to clinch and secure power for themselves at your expense. And that is what our founding fathers were trying to warn us about, and what they were trying to prevent when they drafted the greatest social compact ever devised by the hands of man, yet divinely inspired by Providence itself, and that is our shared Constitution. And pursuant to Article 6, Clause 2 of that sacred document, we know that the Constitution itself is the supreme law of the land. So again, I'm going to ask you to pause for a moment and ask yourself, when was the last time that Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus unequivocally stated, without reservation, without hesitation, that he would support the United States Constitution, that he would rule by the Constitution, and that he would strictly adhere to the Constitution? That's right. If you stop and think about it, he has not mentioned that at any time. He's played lip service to the Constitution at certain times, say with the anchor baby issue with the 14th Amendment. He's done it in an intellectually disingenuous fashion when he tried to claim that Cruz is ineligible to seek the office. And as Jeremy and I have demonstrated in numerous times on past episodes of the Wright Flyer, that's bunk. Because Congress has created laws in furtherance of the Constitution that states that anyone who has a parent who is a natural-born citizen is a natural-born citizen. And yes, I can already hear some of the Trumpeteers say, well, that's what Obama claimed. Yes, Obama was and is a natural-born citizen. Just because we understand that and the law says that, it doesn't mean that we have to agree with his policies. I certainly don't. I think he's been one of the most disastrous presidents in living memory. In fact, I know that Jimmy Carter's wife must be absolutely furious with him because he allowed Obama to take away his crowning achievement of worst president in living memory. That was the one thing he had going for him, and he's not even good enough to keep that. But all kidding aside, when you listen to the type of language that is espoused by Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus at his various campaign rallies and events, it is inciting violence. In fact, I've got another clip here where Trump speaks to the crowd.
And to have a crowd like this on our final day, can you believe it? This is the day. This is the day we take our country back. Remember that. This is the day we take our country back. So I got a little notice in case you see the security guys. We have wonderful security guys. They said, Mr.
Yeah,
Trump,
wonderful security guys like Corey
with tomatoes in the
Lewandowski, who's
audience.
your campaign guy who
So if you see
harms
somebody
women.
getting ready to throw a tomato, knock the crap out of them, would you? Seriously. Okay? Just knock the hell. I promise you, I will pay for the legal fees. I promise. I promise.
I will pay for the legal fees? Folks, that is a direct incitement of violence. There is no way to construe that other than what he is desiring here is for people to become violent, to act out on their violence, to incite violence. And as the fighting words doctrine goes, as I explained at the outset of this program, that does not enjoy or is not afforded our First Amendment protections and guarantees of free speech. And it shouldn't be protected speech because of the nature of what it is, what it can accomplish. And when you think about it, that sort of speech is being used in such a way as to encourage people to encroach upon and abridge the fundamental and unalienable rights of their fellow citizens. And as we all know, based on the natural law tenets that underpin this entire representative republic of ours, that is a violation of the law. Look at the Ninth Amendment. None of these rights should be construed in such a way as to deprive rights of other citizens. That is where that comes into play. So you see that the supreme law of the land clearly lays out exactly how this legal system is supposed to work and how our rights are supposed to work. And that is why we say that the cardinal rule that applies here is that our fundamental and unalienable rights end where another sovereign citizen's fundamental and inalienable rights begin. And that is the major disconnect that we have with respect to Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus. And then with concern to, or with regard to, rather, the statements that Texas Senator Ted Cruz, who was in Chicago when this was happening at a campaign event and rally of his own, said that, yes, Donald Trump is responsible for this incitement of violence. Well, when you look at it in that legal framework, yes. And no, he is not abridging or attacking our First Amendment rights. In fact, of all the candidates who are currently vying for the Republican nomination for President of the United States, only one has stood before the Supreme Court on 9 separate occasions. And need I remind you, folks, that that's more than any other licensed attorney in the state of Texas. And that's quite saying quite something, because it's very difficult to even get an argument before the Supreme Court, and stood up for and defended our fundamental and unalienable rights. He understands what it is, and no, he has not flip-flopped on the issue. He is following the way the law is interpreted currently and understood currently. And it's not that we're interpreting the law, we're reading the law as it's written, clear as day, in black and white, within the 4 corners of our of our shared Constitution, which, pursuant to Article 6, Clause 2, is the supreme law of the land. But it doesn't just stop there. You notice that I mentioned during the little soundbite or clip there of Donaldus Julius Caesar encouraging his supporters and entourage to go out and put people on stretchers, and that he would pay for their legal fees. That what we see there is part of that pattern. We see that he allows his followers to engage in violence, even against a friendly media outlet's reporter. Corey Lewandowski is a member of his top staff, and he has a checkered past, and now there are criminal charges against him. And when you think about that, how is that going to play out when he has to deal with and address media that is not friendly to him? Is it clearly now to the point where if you dare deign to question some of the hollow, empty, and meaningless platitudes that are spewed from the lips of Donaldus Julius Caesar trumpets, that your rights end? You see, this selective outrage that we see on the part of some of these conservatives is troubling. It shows that we are shutting off our mental faculties, that we are disregarding logic and reason and embracing this whirlwind of raw emotionalism, this blind rage, as Jeremy referred to it on last evening's program. But that is detrimental to what is at stake here. And yes, folks, the very sovereignty of this country, the very national character, heritage, spirit, and identity of this country are at dire stakes. And no, that's not to be confused with Trump stakes, which don't exist anymore. And by the way, that's another alarming pattern with Donaldus Julius Caesar trumpets. You know, he always likes to come out there and call Ted Lion Ted. That's mere projection on the part of this bombastic, vulgarian New York billionaire and businessman and real estate tycoon, because he's the one that is consistently inconsistent. He's the one that has been lying time and again, saying different positions, oft times in the span of a single sentence. That is problematic. That speaks volumes about the character or lack thereof with respect to the current frontrunner of the Republican Party. And if you think for a minute that Madam Clinton is not going to exploit this for political points and gain, then you must be out of your mind. As for what Rush Limbaugh said in one of his prior programs, that you must be desperate to draw comparisons to Adolf Hitler, no. After the photographic evidence that we saw from his followers last night presenting the Hitler salute, after seeing him stumble to disavow the endorsements by David Duke, and seeing that his son had given press credentials and VIP parking at a Trump rally and event to a notorious white supremacist radio host, there is enough evidence there to state that if it's not a Nazi connection, it's certainly a fascist connection, and you don't need a direct connection to see it. All you have to do is look in the annals of history, and you see this repeated conduct, this repeated pattern of behavior, and you can compare it to the ways in which Adolf Hitler ascended to power, the ways in which Benito Mussolini ascended to power, in fact, right down to the various mannerisms that Trump has assumed on the various podiums at his campaign rallies and events. And folks, that should send off alarm bells for you. It should cause you to recoil in horror at what this could be. Because if we unleash the horrors of fascism here in the United States of America, that would be a disaster. There can be no question that that would be a disaster for this country, because it means that we would be destroying the foundation and bedrock of this great representative republic of ours. Why would we double down on the efforts that Barack Hussein Obama, the Fabian socialist, has started? Why would we turn to a strongman when, in fact, the only ones who are constitutionally capable of saving this country is we the people? You see, folks, the duty, obligation, and responsibility falls squarely on our shoulders. There is no one else who is capable of handling this. But you're not going to hear that from the pundits from Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media. They're going to double down on their propagandistic message. They're sitting on Trump right now in the hopes that he secures the Republican nomination, because then they are going to go all out on him. They will seize the moment, as Saul Alinsky said in his infamous book, Rules for Radicals. They will personify him as all conservatives, and they will attack on that point until it obliterates him. And that will put our majority in the House and Senate at risk. And folks, need I remind you that with the untimely death of Associate Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia, the very balance of the Supreme Court hangs in the balance, meaning that we could see the 9 robed justices sitting on the highest court in the land continue their assault on our representative Republican form of government. We can see a further erosion of our Constitution, which means that once again the United States of America will be plunged into anarchy and chaos. And whom can we point the finger of blame to for that? None other than we the people. Why? Because it is our duty, our obligation, our responsibility to ensure that the Republican form of government is safeguarded, that we hand it down to the up-and-coming generations, and indeed even those generations that have yet to be born. We have to hand it down to them. Why? Because that is what our founding fathers intended for us to do. That is why our Constitution establishes the system of government as it has. The tenets of federalism have been thrown out of balance. Civil discourse is in disrepair. Morality is crumbling, and our faith in our natural law is at an all-time low. And this is because of the tireless efforts of the Fabian socialists for the past century. They have been incrementally working towards the utter obliteration of everything that it means to be a popular sovereign and everything that it means to be an American citizen. And why? Because they want to rebuild the country in the image of socialism, Marxism. And that is a failed system. And for those who claim to be part of the alternative right, okay, what is your alternative? Nazism? Fascism? There is but one key to saving this country. And that key has been with us from the very beginning, and that is the Constitution of the United States. And anyone who stands up against that is an enemy of the United States. That's the oath of office that our military takes. That's the oath of office that our attorneys take. That is the oath of office that our governmental officials take. Now, on the part of the government officials and on a part of a great many of attorneys, they have been derelict in their duty with respect to living up and fulfilling their oath. But that oath is still there. And that reminds me that when Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus required his voters in Orlando, Florida, and again in North Carolina to swear an oath of allegiance to him, vowing to vote for him, that goes against the Constitution. Again, that is something that fascists do. But Rush Limbaugh still goes and says that it's what? Sheer desperation to say that there are lines of demarcation that can be drawn showing a comparison and contrasting with fascism, Nazism, that is National Socialism, and Trump? Folks, it is not a separate political ideology or philosophy. Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus, for the past 20 some odd years and longer, has constantly espoused so-called progressive views. His support for universal health care, his belief that we should limit the access to assault weapons and ultimately get rid of guns altogether, his belief in using eminent domain to attack the fundamental and unalienable right of the popular sovereign to keep and hold property, to use it in a way that it is not meant to be used pursuant to the Fifth Amendment. Folks, there is a pattern there. And he's going about this like the iconography of the original Fabian Society from 19th century Great Britain, that of a wolf in sheep's clothing. Why would they adopt this imagery and iconography from one of Aesop's most famous fables? Because they want to disperse amongst us, to adopt the appearance of being a part of polite society, of high society, to thereby get their claws into the body politic of the United States of America and to fundamentally transform it. Folks, remember those infamous words that Barack Hussein Obama uttered on the campaign trail during the 2008 election cycle. He uttered those words because he was championing the ideology of the Fabian socialists. His idea of fundamentally transforming the United States of America goes at the heart of what he's doing. These two disastrous terms of the Barack Hussein Obama regime are a pure reflection of that. And if we allow a violent vulgarian like Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus to secure the nomination of the gutless opposition party, it will be a third term of Barack Hussein Obama. If he, by some stretch of the imagination, manages to win the general election, that's how it will be. But more likely, it's going to be that he's going to pave the path for either nerd-faced Bernie Sanders, but most likely Hillary Clinton, who, by the way, attended his wedding. Now, folks, that's not just the cost of doing business in a hostile environment. He was her top donor. He believes even today in universal health care. That is socialized medicine. Folks, he is not going to improve things in this country. And then let's look at his trade policy. This idea of putting a protective tariff on goods brought into this country from foreign nations. Remember the Smoot-Hawley tariff? No, we don't now, but it's certainly there in the history books. Look it up. That's what Herbert Hoover, the last political outsider businessman that we propelled to the White House, did in response to the Great Depression. And it worsened the Depression. That's not laissez-faire. That increases taxes. It means that we, the popular sovereigns, will be burdened with the tax and that we will have to pay for it. And aren't we taxed enough already? Isn't that what the Tea Party stands for? Isn't that the acronym of the Tea Party? It is the taxed enough already party. So how could they support someone who is wanting to implement policies that are a surefire way of increasing exponentially the taxes that we have to pay? If you think our economy is in shambles now, folks, wait until that gets enacted. That's the problem, folks. There is too much at stake to hand our country over to someone who is willfully inciting violence, that is fulfilling every stereotype of the right that is conjured up by the left, and is proud about the violence. He says that that increases his number of voters. Well, it sure as hell isn't going to make me a supporter of him. It just reconfirms my conviction for not supporting this man should he clinch the nomination. I cannot in good conscience support someone that espouses an ideology that my grandfathers went to war over. Have we really fallen so much as a nation that we have forgotten the great and noble struggle that we engaged in during the Second World War? If that is so, then we are a tragedian society that is embracing tragedy and is refusing to see the dangers, the traps and snares that lay in the path before us. We cannot afford that, because should that happen, it means that the battle that we must fight has become all that much more difficult to win. It means that through our blind rage, through our willingness to disregard the facts that we have handed the very identity of this country and those fundamental and unalienable rights that were endowed to us by our Creator over to the agent provocateurs of despotism, tyranny, oppression, and to the potentates who will be laughing all the way to the bank. And folks, let's talk about how Trump always claims that Ted Cruz is owned by the bank, that because he's had to take loans, he's owned by the bank. Well, who is Trump owned by? You know, his building there in Chicago, the very city where all of this violence unfurled last night, it was George Soros, the man who funded the violence on the part of the Black Lives Matters campaign, who funded the building of Trump Tower. I'm seeing a connection here, and I am not a conspiracist by any stretch of the imagination, but it's there to be seen. Yet Alex Jones, the one who is supposed to be our resident expert on conspiracy theories, has failed to connect the dots here. Why? Because he's in that blind rage. And it's because, like Donald, he's a con man. And Drudge has fallen into that, and little orphan Annie Toto Yep has fallen into that. And Sarah Palin has fallen into that category. The betrayal by people like Sarah Palin and Ann Coulter will not soon be forgotten. They speak of anger. They're manipulating the anger for their own political gain. And let's throw Ben Carson in there for a moment too, folks, because there can be no question that what he has done is a betrayal to those who were following him. He supported somebody who called him a pathological child molester. Oh, well, that's just, that's just the nastiness of political campaigning. Bovine excrement. That's taking it to the next level. And what? Ben Carson doesn't think highly enough of himself to not support somebody who would spew such filth? What happened to principle and character? You know, that used to be the cornerstone of what it meant to be an American citizen. You know what our founding fathers valued most when they put everything at risk? The one part in the Declaration of Independence that they really focused on was their sacred honor. Where in the hell is sacred honor in modern America? Because it's certainly not there with Dr. Ben I'm a Victim Carson. It's sure as hell not there with Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus. The only one that I see espousing sacred honor, even going out and apologizing for things that he didn't do anything wrong with, this made-up malarkey of a controversy in Iowa. He apologized. Nobody else has apologized. Has Donaldus Julius Caesar Trump apologized for inciting all this violence, for getting police officers injured because he decided that it would be cool to whip his audience up into such a frenzy that they play into the hands of the social Marxists that are doing everything in their power to destroy this great representative republic of ours? Not once has he apologized. Has Corey Lewandowski been fired for doing these horrific things to that female reporter, Michelle Fields, with Breitbart or Trumpbart News, that has been absolutely friendly to him? No. Where is the media outrage on that? The gross double standard that we always see protecting the Fabian socialist left in this country is being enacted on Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus, and the people are caught up in such blind rage, willful blindness, that they don't even see it. But it's there. It's undeniably there for all of us to see. It's a horrific sight that is playing out in this representative republic of ours. And if we're not careful, we are going to plunge over the precipice, over the cliff, into the abyss of anarchy, chaos, death, mayhem, and destruction. If you just want to light this country on fire, go ahead. Do it. But do not expect there to be no ramifications for your deliberate act of vandalism, sabotage, and destruction. Do not expect those of us that are constitutionalists to roll over and allow you to destroy everything that our forefathers bled, sweat, tears, and hard work, and who even gave up their lives to build, to just fade from the annals of history. We will not lie down and capitulate. We are not the gutless opposition party's detente wing. We are the living embodiment of the revolutionary spirit of our founding fathers, and we will rain down on you like hellfire. If you want to incite violence, expect ramifications from it. But that's not what I'm advocating. I'm just saying that there is a causal reaction that will be unleashed if we allow blind rage to push this country in the wrong direction. Remember that revolutionary spirit could tear up families. In my own family, there were loyalists. Ezekiel Wright was a loyalist, but my lineage, my direct lineage under James Wright, no, it was patriot. They fought each other. They were willing to kill each other. And we are fast approaching a point like that in our history. Open your eyes and wake up to reality. See Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus for what he is. Put your emotions aside and remember your sacred honor, for God's sakes. America is more important than any of us individually, because it is a birthright. Yes, it is the all-important popular sovereign and individual that makes this country strong, but there has to be a greater good. There has to be that natural law that has been handed to us and written on our hearts by our Creator. The moment we forget that and start following the Pied Piper of disillusioned conservatives is the moment that we kiss our liberties and our representative republic goodbye. This is our country, damn it! It's not to be handed over to some charlatan who is purposefully inciting violence. And for those of you that are defending him, listen to your words. And know this: those words will not be soon forgotten. They will not. The danger that you are placing this country in will not be forgotten. We must be responsible for our actions. You're free to support whatever candidate you want, but you must pay the price for it. My price for supporting Ted Cruz, it's this. It's that if he wins, which I am hopeful that he will, I must continue to go out and try and enlighten people with respect to the Constitution, to empower them to remember that they are the popular sovereigns, that they are the ones who are the real source of authority and power in this country. And if by some tragic twist of fate that Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus secures the nomination of the gutless opposition party, it means that I must resist him at every step of the way and vote third party, because I will not cast my name behind a person who is proactively attempting to dismantle our Constitution. Because remember, he's come out and said that he wants to get rid of the public figure exception with libel laws for defamation, so that he can go after anyone who speaks against him. Well, he's already shown that his top brass in Corey Lewandowski is willing to tug down even a reporter who works for a friendly outfit for asking a little bit of a tough question. Why? Because if you deign to question the great Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus, it might ruffle his feathers, it might make him look bad, his little ego can't handle that. Maybe his ego is as stubby as his fingers, I don't know. But the fact of the matter is, what he's doing is detrimental and destructive, and I cannot and will not put my name behind that. I have a feeling that a vast majority of conservatives in this country feel exactly the same way. Do not think that we will just idly allow our country to be stolen from us. If that is to happen, I would rather have it be done by a Democrat than by a Democrat playing around in this charade as a conservative Republican. Because Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus is a Fabian socialist. He was raised as a Fabian socialist. He espoused Fabian socialist beliefs for the last 2 to 3 decades. That hasn't changed. That doesn't show any signs of changing any time in the near future. And the violence is deplorable. And I lay that at the feet of both the left and the left pretending to be the right. You see, folks, we are duty-bound as popular sovereigns to stand up in defense of the greatest social contract that has ever been created by the hands of man, yet divinely inspired. That is a duty and obligation that each and every one of us carries. It's part of what we avail ourselves of when we exercise our fundamental and unalienable rights. And we cannot be any way selective in that defense or in the exercising of those rights. We damn sure cannot deny those rights from our fellow citizens, and that is not what Ted Cruz was saying. But we have to accept responsibility for the words that we say and for the actions that we take. Otherwise, we're not independent. Otherwise, we're just a flock of sheep to be led to slaughter by the first strongman that seizes the reins of power. And we have to be a nation of laws, not of men. That is what we were devised as. And when we start laying a match upon the foundational documents and framework of this country, we must be prepared to suffer the consequences for that as well. Our founding fathers would be out in droves warning us about a charlatan like Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus. He's the strong man that they worried about. Remember, they worried about centralized authority. Well, Trump is all about centralizing authority in him. Every answer he's ever given that isn't some braggadocio type thing is I, me, me. But our founding fathers meant it to be we the people. Look at the first lines of the preamble to the Constitution. It says, we the people. Did you see, folks? That is where we are duty bound. That is how the contract starts. That is what we must accept. And we must return to valuing our sacred honor as a nation and as a people. If our founding fathers could do it, we can do it. And we will stand in staunch opposition to anyone who would espouse violence and attempt to encroach upon or abridge the fundamental and unalienable rights of any citizen. That doesn't mean that we embrace the Fabian socialist message. We oppose them just as much as we oppose those who claim to be part of our side, playing into that sort of twisted machination. Folks, our country is in dire straits as I speak into this microphone. We have seen our national culture, heritage, spirit, and above all, identity come under a deliberate, incessant, tireless attack. But we must remember what it is that defines us, what it is that makes us the people that we are today, how in our relatively short yet illustrious history we attained the lofty heights that we managed to attain as popular sovereigns. Is that the easy path? No. No, it's a difficult path. But we are America. We are the ones who have the indomitable spirit that was capable of standing up to the most well-organized, best-trained, most destructive military force known to man at the time of the inception of our country, the British Empire, and win. Why? Because we embraced the natural law spirit that is endowed in all of the framework of this great representative republic of ours. But we have been led astray. And yes, I'm angry at the detente wing of the gutless opposition party too. But why in the hell would I go out and punish the one guy who has stood up there time and again and resisted them? That has explained his positions to the American people each and every time, that has been stalwart in defending our fundamental and unalienable rights for the entire breadth and scope of his adult life. That doesn't make sense. That's sheer stupidity. And no, I'm not calling the Trump voters stupid for that. I'm saying that the message that they're rallying behind is stupid. That the man that they're following is stupid. Because he is stupid. Anyone who incites violence and then says that's okay and gives ammunition to those who are out to destroy us is stupid. We must recall who we are. And we must reevaluate what is important to us. To do anything less is to betray the memory of our founding fathers and is to betray the bequestment that we will leave to the up and coming generations and those generations yet to be born. That is a powerful duty, obligation, and responsibility that is laid upon our shoulders, but it is one that is laid upon our shoulders by right of birth. How quickly we forget how important the Constitution is. How quickly we can be duped by a charlatan, a snake oil salesman that is preaching a message that can sound too good to be true, and then espouses violence and turns people against one another with blind rage so that they forget the humanity of their opponents. What in the hell is that if it is not barbaric? And no, I'm not saying this as an elitist. I couldn't care less whether you're one of the poorly educated that Trump loves. I'm surprised that you would follow him when he insults you like that, when you are actually the salt of the earth, the backbone of this country. Your experiences make you great. Your freedoms make you greater still. Please do not sacrifice that for a feel-good charlatan that is preaching a message of populism, a message that has failed each and every time that it has been tried. Our country matters too much to allow that. Our country matters too much to gamble it on a gambler. And yes, Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus says that everything is negotiable. Our fundamental and unalienable rights are non-negotiable. Our constitutional system of government is non-negotiable. That's why the political question doctrine exists. That's why the New York judge has already thrown out a challenge against Ted Cruz on this harebrained scheme that Donaldus cooked out of his hairpiece there, about that he's not qualified to run. What a bunch of malarkey. What a bunch of bovine excrement. The political question doctrine's there because it is designed to protect our representative Republican form of government. That is the court saying it's non-negotiable. But for Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus, anything and everything is negotiable. And then if you recall what he said in The Art of the Deal, he's going to approach something at the start with the most stalwart position and slowly whittle his way back. And you will feel betrayed when that happens, those of you who support him. But you will have no one else to blame but yourself, because you chose not to listen to the warnings that have been presented to you, just as the German people were responsible for Hitler for refusing to listen to the words of caution and warning, just as the Italian people were responsible for choosing to fail to heed the warnings of people. The same with all of the Axis powers. But you know what? It's even more so in this country, because in those countries, they didn't have a full-fledged or fleshed notion of popular sovereignty. We in the United States of America were the first to have that. That was what was so revolutionary about our inception. And have we forgotten that? Have we become so self-centered, so decrepit, so dependent that we have lost sight of everything that has made us great? If so, that is a very tragic thing to admit and to wrap our minds around. And it means that our great republic may collapse. Because what Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus is throwing out there to the cameras of the salivating mainstream media is nothing short of bread and circuses. It is pushing this country once again near the edge of death, destruction, anarchy, chaos, and tyranny. Can we afford that? Stop and seriously consider whether we can afford that as a nation and as a people. I know for a fact that we cannot afford that. It is time to make America smart again. And no, that is not from some elitist position as Trump Limbaugh might want to paint it. Rush, I still respect you, but God, you've got to get off this bandwagon. It is not good for you. It is driving listeners away. Stop playing both sides and take a stance. Take a stance on sacred honor just as our founding fathers did, as your brother has. This country is too important to let go without a fight. And if they want to incite violence and if they want to fight, we will defend ourselves. And no, folks, that is not an incitement of violence. That is a statement of fact. I didn't start this. Jeremy didn't start this. Ted Cruz didn't start this. Even those wishy-washy charlatans and frauds, Narco Rube, EIEIO, and John the Mushroom, my dad was a mailman, Kasich, didn't start this. And it was the left that started it. But who picked up the baton and kept running with it? The hairpiece, Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus, the one who is pitting American against American right now at a greater fever pitch than Bernie Sanders or Hillary Clinton could have ever dreamed possible. Donald Trump is like a dream come true for them. That's who they want to campaign against because they're going to be able to see, look at how rabid and hateful the right is. In the past, we'd have policy positions to fall back on to refute them and rebut them. Now we have nothing because Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus is burning it to the ground. Shake yourself out of the delirium for your own sakes, for the sakes of those you love and cherish and hold dear. Remember our duty of obligation to the Constitution as popular sovereigns. That is crucial. It is critical. It is what we must do. Because if we fail to do so, we are not only failing the generations that preceded us, we are failing the generations that will proceed us. And history will be most harsh in its judgment on we the people for allowing this, the longest running uninterrupted constitutional representative republic in all of world history to teeter and collapse because we bought into the lies of a charlatan. We're better than this. We're better than this as a nation and as a people. And this dark, tragic chapter in American history needs to come to a swift end. And we need to come back to our senses. And no, that's not just some vulgar position on my part. The vulgarity falls at the feet of Donaldus Julius Caesar Trumpus and his little yapping lapdog, little orphan Annie Yap Yap Toto. And Dr. Ben Carson, shame on you. How does it feel to hold those 30 pieces of silver in your hands, to sell out your sacred honor, to betray the constitutional purpose, framework, and structure of this country? Many of your followers are feeling greatly betrayed right now, and I don't blame them. To those followers, I reach out the olive branch and say, join us in preserving and saving our Constitution. Join us in preserving sacred honor and restoring morality in this country. Because at this point, it is just we the people. It is up to we the people to take the steps that are necessary to bring this country back from the brink of ruin and destruction. And that is the way the Founding Fathers intended it to be. That only we, the American people, could do that, could accomplish that, could work so hard to achieve that. Sacred honor must once again become a central focal point of this great nation. And with that said, it is time for us to begin our descent. I'm going to go ahead and send the flight attendant back for one last round of alcohol. As always, ladies and gentlemen, I'm your captain, Randy Wright, and I would like to take this opportunity to thank you for choosing to fly the Wright Flyer. I also invite you to leave any questions, comments, or concerns that you have either here on our YouTube page or on our Google Plus page or our Facebook page, and do follow us at Radio Aviation EX at Twitter. Once again, that's at Radio Aviation EX, all one word, at Radio Aviation EX. And there you will find pinned the personal Twitter account of my first officer, Jeremy Grapenton, and yours truly, and also the link to our blog, as well as the link to our new Cafe Press account, where you can buy all sorts of Wright Flyer merchandise and help support this little program that we put out for you folks. Remember, folks, we do this for you. We couldn't do this without you, and we thank you for your listening. It's a great honor to us. It's humbling for us. Once again, folks, thank you for choosing to fly the Wright Flyer, and we hope to see you the next time that we take off over the friendly airwaves, leaving you with an indelible yet pure sense of enlightenment unlike any other radio program or venue out there. Do take care, folks. See you next time.